Hello again, everyone. This session is about Advanced Supervised Release. Who can get it, how to order it, and what it means for defendants as a practical matter. Advanced Supervised Release, or ASR, is a relatively new part of our sentencing law. It was added in 2011 as part of the Justice Reinvestment Act, and what it allows for that's unique under structured sentencing is a way for a person to get released from prison before they serve their minimum sentence. So ordinarily under structured sentencing, if a person had, say, a 10 to 21 month sentence, there would be no way, no matter how much earned time the person accrued, that they could get released before that 10-month minimum sentence. Well, with Advanced Supervised Release, the court can order an ASR date, and we'll cover in this session how to determine that or how to calculate that. And if the person completes what the law refers to as risk reduction incentives while they're in prison, then they can be released on this ASR date, which falls before the minimum term of imprisonment. Now, not every defendant is eligible for advanced supervised release. If you look at the governing statute, which is 15A 1340.18, you can see that the law sets out these eligibility criteria over here. And if we look at that on the sentencing grid, what we see is that only certain Class D through H felons are eligible. For the Class D, it's everybody in prior record levels 1 through 3. Then for Class E, it goes out to prior record level 4. For Class F, out to 5. And then for Class G and Class H felons, all of them are eligible. So everybody inside that area is eligible for ASR. With the one additional caveat that the law says it only applies to defendants sentenced to active time. And the notion there is that nobody who receives a probationary sentence at the outset should receive an ASR date. So how do you figure that ASR date? What the statute tells us is that it starts with the regular sentence imposed pursuant to Article 81B of the General Statutes, which is just structured sentencing. And it says that the ASR date for that regular sentence is going to be the shortest mitigated sentence that the defendant could have received at his or her prior record level. So that's going to be the rule for any presumptive or aggravated range sentence for determining the ASR date. If the regular sentence came from the mitigated range in the first place, then you apply a slightly different rule. The ASR date is 80% of the minimum sentence that the court actually imposed. So that's the rule for any mitigated range sentence. Now that's a little hard to think about in the abstract, so let's apply it to a real defendant and see how it works out. Assume we have a Class H, Level 1 defendant. Let's walk through and figure out for whatever regular sentence the court might impose, let's walk through and determine what the corresponding ASR date would be. If the regular sentence is anything from the presumptive range or from the aggravated range, the rule says that the ASR date is the shortest mitigated sentence the person could have received for his or her prior record level, and that is going to be 4 months. So if the regular sentence is a presumptive, let's say 6 to 17 month sentence, the ASR date is going to be 4 months. If the regular sentence is an aggravated range 8 to 19 month sentence, again, the ASR date is going to be 4 months. It's always going to be that number in the lower left-hand corner of the defendant's grid cell. Now, if the regular sentence comes from the mitigated range, let's say the defendant got a mitigated range sentence, a regular sentence of 4 to 14 months, that's when the rule kicks in that you have to do a little bit of math. The ASR date is 80% of the minimum sentence that was imposed. So the 4-month imposed minimum times 80% times 0.8 equals an ASR date of 3.2 months. And there's no rounding provision in the law, so I think that's what the clerk would write on the judgment. So that's how you figure the ASR date. If choose a regular sentence, if it comes from the presumptive range or the aggravated range, then your ASR date is this number in the lower left-hand corner of the grid cell. if the regular sentence comes from the mitigated range to begin with, then you do a little bit of math here, multiply the minimum sentence you selected by 0.8, and that gets you your ASR date. Now, as far as how that gets reflected on the judgment form, let's assume the judge imposes a 6 to 17 month sentence with a 4-month ASR date. So here's the judgment form, and if you look down here in the lower left, you can see that the court would put in the regular sentence of 6 to 17 months, and then if you were going to do an ASR date, check the ASR box and put in the ASR date that we determined before of 4 months. You can also see that there's a little bit of additional work to be done on side 2. There's a reference to it there in the notes, so let's take a look at what that is. So here's the back of the form, and if you look at number 4 here, what it says is, without objection by the state, the defendant shall be admitted to ASR. This additional part of the order is required because by statute, ASR can't be ordered over the objection of the prosecutor. The prosecutor essentially has veto power over the court's decision to give the defendant an ASR date. So how do things play out in practice for our 6 to 17 month regular sentence with an advanced supervised release date of 4 months? Well, we know the regular sentence has this 6-month minimum, the 17-month maximum, that by default the person will be released from prison at their maximum minus 9, which in this case is 8 months, that will typically leave these last 9 months of imprisonment as the time that hangs over the person's head during post-release supervision. That PRS period for this Class H felon would be 9 months, and that the release point for this person would be somewhere between 6 and 8 months, depending on how much earned time the inmate accrues. So that's how the regular sentence would work. But this inmate got ASR, and so if he completes his risk reduction incentives, that means he gets out not in the regular 6 to 8 month window, but rather on the ASR date, which is 4 months. Now that doesn't mean he gets released outright at that point. This is advanced supervised release. What it means is he gets released at the 4-month point to be on post-release supervision for 9 months. An interesting thing about ASR, though, is that unlike the regular defendant who's on post-release supervision for 9 months with these 9 months of imprisonment hanging over their head, because the advanced supervised release defendant was released early, they have, in this case, something like 13 months hanging over their head, maybe a little bit less if the defendant had accrued some earned time while in prison, and so they're on post-release supervision for 9 months with a longer than usual term of imprisonment hanging over their head, and that imprisonment they could be returned to prison to serve it if they violate the conditions of their post-release supervision. So they do get out a little bit earlier, in this case, 2 months earlier than the best case scenario for a regular sentence inmate. But that time doesn't go away. The imprisonment time doesn't go away. It does hang over their head during their term of supervised release. Let me conclude with one final point about ASR. For this Class H felon that we've been discussing, with the 6 to 17 month regular sentence and the 4-month ASR date, as we've discussed, this person could get out of prison about 2 months early through their ASR date. There are defendants further up the sentencing grid for whom ASR could make a much more dramatic difference in the way the sentence is served. Like, say, for example, this Class D Level 1 defendant. If this person got a regular sentence from the top of the presumptive range, that would wind up being a 64 to 89 month sentence. The ASR date for that sentence would be 38 months. It's the lowest mitigated sentence the person could have received. That ASR date is 26 months before the regular minimum sentence. So you're talking about a release over 2 years before the regular sentence release point. And that's not to say whether it's good or bad, it's just good to know because it definitely makes a difference. So those are some of the basics of advanced supervised release. Thanks for watching.